A poor schoolteacher stayed late with a crying girl abandoned after class, offering her warmth and comfort in a dusty frontier schoolhouse. She had no idea the man who'd forgotten his daughter was Samuel Thornton, the wealthiest rancher in the Arizona Territory, a man who owned more land than some states, controlled the cattle trade for hundreds of miles, and hadn't smiled since the day he buried his wife. What started as a simple act of kindness would ignite rumors that nearly destroyed her reputation, force her to choose between her livelihood and her heart, and lead to a moment in front of the entire town that no one saw coming. This is the story of how a forgotten little girl, a grieving father, and a compassionate teacher became something none of them expected, a family. But first, it all began on a quiet autumn afternoon when Clara Bennett heard the sound of soft crying echoing through an empty classroom. It was a quiet autumn afternoon in Red Creek, Arizona Territory. The year was 1887, and the desert sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. Inside the one-room schoolhouse at the edge of town, the wooden floorboards creaked softly as Clara Bennett moved between the rows of empty desks, collecting slates and putting away primers. Clara was 26 years old, with chestnut brown hair, pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, and kind hazel eyes that seemed to notice everything. Her dress was simple, a faded blue calico that had been mended more times than she could count, but it was clean and pressed. She earned barely enough to afford a room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house and put food on her table, but she loved teaching more than anything in the world. These children were her purpose. Outside, the last of the parents had collected their young ones. Horses whinnied softly as wagons rolled away down the dusty main road. The usual chatter of children's voices had faded into the stillness of late afternoon. The schoolhouse should have been empty by now, but then Clara heard it, a soft, broken sound coming from the corner near the pot-bellied stove. She turned quickly, her heart tightening. There, curled up on the wooden bench beneath the coat hooks, was a small figure in a cream-colored dress with lace trim. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, clutched a stuffed cloth rabbit against her chest. Her golden curls were tied with a blue ribbon, and tears streamed silently down her freckled cheeks. "Lily," Clara said gently, crossing the room. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" The little girl didn't look up. Her small shoulders trembled as she sniffled, pressing her face into the rabbit's worn fabric. Clara knelt beside her, smoothing a hand over Lily's hair. "Did your papa forget to pick you up?" Lily nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "He's always busy. He forgets me." Clara's heart ached. She'd taught Lily Thornton for nearly 3 months now, and the girl was bright, sweet, and impossibly lonely. Her mother had died over a year ago, and since then, Lily had grown quieter with each passing week. Clara had noticed the sadness in her eyes, the way she clung to any scrap of affection. "Come on," Clara said softly. "Let's wait together. I'll make us some tea." She led Lily to the small teacher's desk at the front of the room. From her satchel, Clara pulled out a tin of chamomile tea and a small jar of honey she kept for difficult days. She lit the small stove in the corner and set a dented kettle to boil. Within minutes, she poured warm tea into 2 mismatched tin cups. Lily took the cup with both hands, her tears slowing. "Do you think he forgot on purpose?" "No, darling," Clara said, sitting beside her. "Sometimes grown-ups get caught up in their work. It doesn't mean they don't love you." Lily looked up at her with wide blue eyes. "My mama used to wait with me. She'd sing songs." Clara's throat tightened. "Would you like me to sing?" Lily nodded. So Clara hummed a soft melody, an old lullaby her own mother had sung to her as a child. She stroked Lily's hair gently, and slowly, the little girl's breathing evened out. Her eyelids grew heavy. Before long, she was asleep, her head resting against Clara's shoulder. Outside, the wind began to pick up. Dust swirled down the empty street. The sky darkened as storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Then suddenly the sound of hoofbeats, fast and urgent. Clara looked up just as the schoolhouse door swung open with a bang. A tall man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. His black Stetson was pulled low, his long coat dusty from riding. He was broad-shouldered and imposing, his jaw tight with tension. His sharp green eyes scanned the room frantically until they landed on the small figure asleep against Clara's side. "Lily," he breathed, his voice rough with relief. Clara stood carefully, cradling the child. The man stepped forward, removing his hat. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone clipped. "A fence broke on the south pasture. I lost track of time." Clara studied him for a moment. His face was lined with exhaustion, his hands calloused from work. But there was something else, something hollow in his eyes. "She's all right," Clara said quietly, "just scared and tired." The man nodded stiffly. He reached out and gently lifted Lily into his arms. She stirred slightly, her small arms wrapping around his neck instinctively. "I'm Samuel Thornton," he said, his voice softer now. I appreciate you staying." Clara's breath caught. Samuel Thornton. Everyone in Red Creek knew that name. He owned the largest ranch in the territory, the Iron T. Thousands of acres, hundreds of cattle, and more wealth than most folks could imagine. And he'd been a ghost since his wife died. "Clara Bennett," she replied. "I teach Lily's class." Samuel nodded once. His gaze lingered on her for just a moment. A look she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. Then, without another word, he turned and carried his daughter out into the gathering storm. Clara stood alone in the empty schoolhouse, the warmth of Lily's small body still lingering against her side. And though she didn't know it yet, everything had just changed. Samuel Thornton was a man the entire territory spoke of in hushed tones, some with admiration, others with fear, and most with a mixture of both. He owned the Iron T Ranch, a sprawling empire of cattle and land that stretched across the valley as far as the eye could see. His brand was recognized in every stockyard from Tucson to Santa Fe. When Samuel Thornton spoke, cattle buyers listened. When he rode into town, men tipped their hats and women whispered behind gloved hands. But wealth and power hadn't shielded him from heartbreak. A year and a half ago, his wife Catherine had been riding back from town when her horse spooked at a rattlesnake. She was thrown from the saddle, her neck breaking instantly. Samuel found her himself, cradled her body in the dust, and something inside him died that day too. He'd become a ghost in his own life, present in body but absent in spirit. He buried himself in work, expanding the ranch, driving cattle, mending fences until his hands bled, anything to keep from feeling. Lily had been only 4 when it happened. She'd cried for weeks, calling for her mama in the night. But eventually the tears stopped. The silence that replaced them was worse. Samuel hired housekeepers and ranch hands' wives to watch her, but they rotated so often that Lily never formed attachments. He told himself it was better that way, safer, until Miss Clara Bennett. Samuel noticed the change on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after that rainy afternoon. Lily was standing by the window of their ranch house, clutching a piece of folded paper like it was made of gold. She'd spent the entire evening before coloring it by lamplight, her tongue poking out in concentration. "What's that, little one?" Samuel asked, setting down his coffee. Lily's face lit up, a brightness he hadn't seen in over a year. "It's for Miss Clara. I drew our ranch. See, that's you, and that's me, and that's Miss Clara picking wildflowers." Samuel took the paper. The drawing was crude but clear. 3 stick figures standing in front of a house, a sun overhead, flowers dotting the ground. His chest tightened unexpectedly. "She likes when I draw pictures," Lily continued, her voice eager. "She puts them on the wall and says I'm the best artist in class." "Can I go early tomorrow, please, Papa?" Samuel stared at his daughter. When had she started calling him Papa again instead of Father? When had that light returned to her eyes? "Yes," he said quietly. "I'll take you myself." The next morning, Samuel did something he hadn't done in months. He personally drove the wagon to the schoolhouse instead of sending a ranch hand. He stood outside the door, arms crossed, his black Stetson shading his eyes. Through the window, he could see inside. Clara Bennett was kneeling on the floor, helping a group of children build a miniature log cabin out of sticks. Her hair had come slightly loose from its pins, and her face glowed with genuine joy. She looked up when Lily burst through the door. Miss Clara, I made something for you." Clara's face broke into a radiant smile. "Oh, Lily, let me see." Lily handed over the drawing with both hands. Bouncing on her toes, Clara studied it carefully, her expression soft and warm. "This is beautiful, sweetheart." "Is this your home?" "Yes." "And that's you. Papa says maybe you can visit sometime." Samuel's jaw tightened. He hadn't said that, but he also hadn't corrected her. Clara looked up then and spotted him standing in the doorway. Their eyes met. For a moment, something passed between them, unspoken, uncertain, but undeniably there. "Mr. Thornton," Clara said, standing and smoothing her skirt. She walked toward him with a quiet grace that made him suddenly aware of how dusty and rough he must look. "Miss Bennett," he replied, his voice formal. "Lily insisted on delivering her artwork personally." "Well, I'm honored," Clara said, glancing back at the little girl who was already showing her drawing to the other children. "She's very talented and very kind." Samuel nodded, unsure what to say. Words didn't come easily to him anymore. Clara tilted her head slightly, studying him. "We're having a small harvest festival this Saturday. At the schoolhouse. The children are performing songs and recitations. Parents are welcome." Samuel shifted his weight. "I don't usually attend those things." "I understand," Clara said gently, "but Lily practices her song every day. She'd be thrilled if you came." He glanced past her at Lily, who was now laughing with another child, actually laughing, a sound he'd almost forgotten. "I'll think about it," he muttered. Clara smiled, not pushy, just warm. "That's all I ask." As he turned to leave, he heard Lily call out, "Bye, Papa. I love you." His steps faltered. He didn't turn around, but his hand gripped the door frame tightly. "I love you too, Lily," he said, his voice barely audible. Clara watched him walk back to his wagon, his broad shoulders tense, his stride purposeful but heavy. She saw the way his hand lingered on the wagon's edge before he climbed up, the way he looked back at the schoolhouse once before riding off. Samuel Thornton was a man carrying a mountain of grief, and somehow, without meaning to, Clara had started helping him carry it. That Saturday, against every instinct telling him to stay away, Samuel Thornton arrived at the schoolhouse harvest festival. He stood at the back, hat in hand, watching his daughter sing with a smile that could light up the entire territory. And when Lily's eyes found him in the crowd, her whole face transformed with joy. For the first time in 18 months, Samuel Thornton smiled back. The harvest festival was held in the golden light of late afternoon, with hay bales arranged in a semicircle and colorful paper decorations strung between the schoolhouse posts. Parents sat on blankets and wooden benches, fanning themselves in the September heat, while children fidgeted in their Sunday best. Samuel stood at the back, leaning against a cottonwood tree, arms crossed. He told himself he was only staying for Lily's performance. Then he'd leave. He had cattle to count, fences to inspect, 1,000 things that needed his attention. But when Lily stepped forward with the other children and began singing Red River Valley in her small, clear voice, something inside him cracked. She looked so much like Catherine, the same golden curls, the same blue eyes, the same tilt of her head when she concentrated. For a moment, the grief was so sharp he nearly turned and walked away. Then Lily's eyes found his. She smiled, bright and genuine, and kept singing. Samuel stayed rooted to the spot. When the song ended, parents applauded. Lily ran straight to Clara, who knelt down and embraced her warmly. You were wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Did you see Papa? Lily asked breathlessly. He came. He really came. Clara looked up, her gaze finding Samuel across the yard. She smiled gently and nodded toward him. Lily turned and sprinted toward her father, her little boots kicking up dust. She crashed into his legs, wrapping her arms around his knees. Papa, did you hear me sing? Samuel's hand came down to rest on her head, his touch careful, as if she might break. I did. You were perfect, Lily. She beamed up at him. Miss Clara taught us the harmony. Can we stay for the pie? He hesitated. Being here, surrounded by families, by laughter and warmth, it felt like stepping into a life that no longer belonged to him. But Lily's hopeful face was impossible to refuse. Just for a little while, he said quietly. They sat together on a blanket Clara had spread beneath the cottonwood tree. She'd brought a basket with cornbread, cold chicken, and 2 slices of apple pie. Lily chattered endlessly about school, about her friends, about the spelling bee next month. Samuel listened, his responses brief but present. Clara sat nearby, occasionally joining the conversation, her presence steady and unobtrusive. At one point, Lily ran off to play with the other children. Samuel watched her go, his jaw tight. She's happy, Clara said softly, breaking the silence. Samuel didn't look at her. She wasn't. For a long time. Children are resilient, Clara replied, but they need to know they're not alone. He turned to face her then, his green eyes shadowed with something raw. Her mother died a 1.5 years ago, thrown from a horse. I found her lying in the dirt, already gone. Clara's breath caught. I'm so sorry. Lily cried for weeks. I didn't know how to help her. I didn't know how to help myself. His voice was low, strained. So I worked. I built fences, moved cattle, expanded the ranch. I thought if I stayed busy enough, it wouldn't hurt so much. And did it work? Clara asked gently. Samuel let out a bitter laugh. No, it just made me realize how empty my house was. Clara looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. Grief is like that. It doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. It waits. You sound like you know something about it, Samuel said, studying her. Clara was quiet for a moment. My father died when I was 12. Fever took him in 3 days. My mother tried to keep the farm going, but we lost it a year later. She died of a broken heart not long after. She paused. I understand what it's like to lose everything and have to learn how to keep living anyway. Samuel's expression softened. Is that why you became a teacher? Partly, Clara said. I wanted to give children something I didn't have after my parents died. Someone who saw them, who cared. She looked toward Lily, who was laughing as she chased another girl around the schoolyard. Children like Lily, they just need to know they matter. Samuel was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. She talks about you at home. All the time. You're the first person she's let in since Catherine died. Clara met his eyes. She's a remarkable little girl. She is, Samuel agreed, then quieter. You've given her something I couldn't. You've given her a father who shows up, Clara said firmly. That matters more than you know. Across the yard, Lily tripped over a rock and scraped her knee. She let out a cry, and both Samuel and Clara stood instinctively. But it was Clara who reached her first, kneeling down and gently brushing away the dirt. You're all right, sweetheart, Clara murmured. Just a little scrape. Let's clean it up. Lily threw her arms around Clara's neck, burying her face in her shoulder. It hurts, she whimpered. I know, darling. I know. Clara held her close, stroking her hair. Samuel stood a few feet away, watching. His chest felt tight. Catherine used to comfort Lily exactly like that. The same gentle touch, the same soothing voice. But instead of pain, what he felt was something else. Gratitude. And beneath that, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a very long time. Hope. The weeks that followed unfolded slowly, like the careful turning of pages in a well-worn book. Samuel began doing something he hadn't done in over a year. He started coming into town more often, not just for supplies or business, but to pick up Lily from school himself. The first few times, he simply nodded to Clara from the doorway, tipped his hat, and left with Lily in tow. But gradually the exchanges grew longer. "How was she today?" he'd ask, standing in the threshold with his hat in his hands. "Wonderful," Clara would reply with a warm smile. "She's reading above her level now, and her arithmetic is improving every day." Samuel would nod, a flicker of pride crossing his features. "She gets that from her mother." Catherine was sharp with numbers. It was the first time he'd spoken Catherine's name aloud to anyone outside the ranch in months. Clara noticed but didn't press. She simply smiled and said, "Lily's lucky to have had such a strong example." One crisp October afternoon, Lily came running up to Clara's desk with a handful of wildflowers she'd picked during recess. Desert marigolds and purple asters, slightly wilted but cheerful. "These are for you, Miss Clara," Lily announced proudly. Clara accepted them with genuine delight. "They're beautiful, Lily. Thank you." "Papa says when you give someone flowers, it means you care about them," Lily said matter-of-factly. "I care about you very much." Clara's eyes glistened. She knelt down and pulled Lily into a gentle embrace. "I care about you too, sweetheart. Very much." When Samuel arrived that afternoon, Clara was pressing the flowers between the pages of her grammar book. He noticed immediately. "Lily's gift?" he asked. "Yes," Clara said, looking up. "I'll treasure them." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, a softening around his eyes. "She doesn't give flowers to just anyone." "Then I'm honored," Clara replied quietly. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. The late afternoon sun streamed through the schoolhouse windows, casting golden light across the worn wooden floor. Outside, Lily was showing another child how to skip stones she'd collected. "Would you," Samuel began, then stopped, clearing his throat. "Would you like to come out to the ranch sometime for Sunday dinner?" Lily's been asking. Clara's heart skipped. "I wouldn't want to impose." "You wouldn't be," Samuel said quickly. "Our housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, makes enough food to feed half the territory, and Lily would be thrilled." Clara smiled. "Then I'd be delighted." That Sunday, Clara borrowed a horse from the livery and rode out to the Iron Tea Ranch. The property was even more impressive than she'd imagined. Endless rolling hills dotted with cattle, sturdy corrals, a large ranch house with a wraparound porch, and bunkhouses for the ranch hands in the distance. Lily was waiting on the porch steps and came running the moment she spotted Clara. "You came! You really came!" Samuel emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. He'd cleaned up, fresh shirt, hair combed back, boots polished. Clara noticed, and something warm bloomed in her chest. "Welcome to the Iron Tea," Samuel said, a hint of pride in his voice. Dinner was simple but delicious. Roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple cobbler. Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind woman in her 50s, fussed over Clara like she was family. Lily sat between Clara and Samuel, chattering about everything and nothing. After dinner, Samuel showed Clara around the property. They walked along the fence line as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Lily ran ahead, chasing a jackrabbit that bounded through the sagebrush. "This land," Samuel said quietly, "has been in my family for 2 generations. My father built this ranch from nothing. When he died, I promised I'd make it even greater." "You've certainly succeeded," Clara observed. "But what good is success if you're alone in it?" Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Catherine and I built this life together. When she died, I thought the best thing I could do was just keep building, keep working, but Lily needed more than that. She needed—" "A parent who was present," Clara finished gently. Samuel nodded. "You helped me see that. You helped me see her again, really see her." Clara's throat tightened. "You were always there, Mr. Thornton." You just needed to find your way back. Samuel, he corrected softly. Please, call me Samuel. Samuel, Clara repeated, the name feeling intimate on her lips. They stood there in the fading light, the desert stretching endlessly around them. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. Lily's laughter carried on the evening breeze. Thank you, Samuel said, his green eyes intense, for not giving up on her, on us. Clara felt her heart thunder in her chest. I couldn't if I tried. As the first stars appeared overhead, Samuel walked Clara back to the ranch house. Their hands brushed once, twice, accidental at first, then lingering. Neither pulled away. When Clara finally rode back to town that evening, Lily waved from the porch until she disappeared from sight. Samuel stood beside his daughter, his hand resting on her shoulder. For the first time since Catherine's death, the ranch house didn't feel quite so empty, and in town, Clara lay awake in her small boarding room, replaying every word, every glance, every moment. Something was growing between them, tender and fragile as a desert bloom after rain, and neither of them could deny it anymore. The trouble started on a Wednesday morning in late October, when Mrs. Prudence Blackwood arrived at the general store with her nose in the air and poison on her tongue. Prudence Blackwood was the wife of Chester Blackwood, who owned the second-largest ranch in the territory, though his holdings were a distant second to the Iron T. She was a woman who measured her worth by the things she possessed and the people she could look down upon. She wore imported silk dresses, hosted lavish parties, and made it her business to know everyone else's business. And she had noticed Samuel Thornton's wagon parked outside the schoolhouse far too often lately. I'm just saying, Prudence announced loudly to the cluster of women gathered near the fabric bolts. It's highly irregular for a man of Samuel Thornton's standing to be spending so much time with a schoolteacher, a poor one at that. Mrs. Henderson, Clara's landlady, stiffened. Miss Bennet is a fine teacher and a respectable young woman. Prudence waved her hand dismissively. Oh, I'm sure she's perfectly adequate at teaching children their letters. But you must admit it looks suspicious. A young, unmarried woman, alone with a wealthy widower, and his poor motherless child caught in the middle. They're never alone, Mrs. Henderson protested. Lily is always present. Today, perhaps, Prudence said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the store. But who knows what arrangements they might be making. Samuel Thornton is one of the wealthiest men in the territory. Some women might see an opportunity. The implication hung in the air like smoke. By noon, the rumor had spread through Red Creek like wildfire. By evening, it had reached the ranches beyond. Clara Bennet, the poor school teacher, was setting her cap at Samuel Thornton. She was using his vulnerable daughter to worm her way into his fortune. She was inappropriate, calculating, a gold digger. Clara first heard the whispers on Thursday afternoon when she went to the general store for supplies. The conversation died the moment she entered. Women who usually greeted her warmly suddenly found their shopping very interesting. The store owner was polite but distant. Clara's cheeks burned as she paid for her flour and sugar. She walked back to the boarding house with her head high, but her hands trembled. That evening, Mrs. Henderson knocked on her door. Don't you listen to those vipers, the older woman said firmly. Anyone with eyes can see you're a good woman. But Clara couldn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling, wondering if she should step back, create distance between herself and the Thorntons. The last thing she wanted was to damage Lily or Samuel's reputation. On Friday, things got worse. 3 sets of parents withdrew their children from Clara's class. They were polite but firm. We think it's best, one father said, not meeting her eyes. Given the circumstances, Clara felt sick. She'd worked so hard to build trust in this community, and now, because she'd shown kindness to a lonely child, it was crumbling around her. Samuel noticed something was wrong when he came to pick up Lily that afternoon. Clara's usual warmth was guarded. She barely met his eyes. Is everything all right, we out? He asked. Fine, Clara said quickly, too quickly. Lily had a wonderful day. Samuel frowned, but didn't press. Lily hugged Clara goodbye as always, but Clara's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was Lily who told him. That evening, as Samuel tucked her into bed, she said quietly, "Emily's mama said Emily can't sit next to me anymore. She said her mama thinks Miss Clara is bad." Samuel went very still. "What?" "She said Miss Clara is trying to trick you because you're rich," Lily continued, her voice small. "But that's not true, is it, Papa? Miss Clara is good. She's my favorite person besides you." Samuel's jaw clenched so hard it ached. "Miss Clara is very good, Lily, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong." But after Lily fell asleep, Samuel paced his study, fury building in his chest. He knew exactly where these rumors originated. Prudence Blackwood had been trying to match him with her niece for months. When he'd shown no interest, she'd grown spiteful. The next morning, Samuel rode into town with purpose. He went straight to Clara's boarding house and knocked firmly on the door. Mrs. Henderson answered. "Mr. Thornton, she's not receiving visitors today." "I need to speak with her," Samuel said. "Please." Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her simple day dress, her hair unpinned. She looked tired, defeated. "Samuel, you shouldn't be here," she said softly. "You're only making it worse." "Making what worse?" he demanded. "The talk. The rumors." Clara descended the stairs slowly. "Parents are pulling their children from my class. People think that I'm using Lily to—" Her voice broke. Samuel's expression darkened. "That's absurd." "Is it?" Clara asked, her eyes glistening. "I'm poor. You're wealthy. I'm unmarried. You're a widower. People see what they want to see." "I don't care what people see," Samuel said firmly. "But I do," Clara whispered. "I care about my reputation. I care about my position, and I care about Lily. If this continues, it will hurt all of us, especially her." Samuel stepped closer. "So what are you saying?" Clara's heart was breaking, but she forced the words out. "I'm saying maybe we should keep our distance, for a while, until things settle." "No," Samuel said immediately. "Samuel." "No," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "I've lost too much already. I won't lose this too. I won't lose you." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Clara's breath caught. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Samuel said quietly. "I know you've brought light back into my daughter's life. Into my life. And I know that walking away from that would be the biggest mistake I could make." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. "But what if I can't teach anymore? What if—" "Then we'll figure it out," Samuel interrupted. "Together." But even as he said it, they both knew the damage was done. The rumors had taken root. And in a small frontier town, reputation was everything. Clara Bennett had always been a woman of principle. She'd survived losing her parents, losing her home, and clawing her way to respectability through sheer determination and hard work. But standing in her small boarding room on a cold November morning, staring at the formal letter from the school board, she realized that sometimes principle wasn't enough. The letter was polite but clear. "Due to concerns raised by several families regarding conduct unbecoming of a teacher in our community, we regretfully request your resignation, effective immediately. Your final wages will be provided upon departure." Clara's hands shook as she read it a second time. They were dismissing her, not for anything she'd done wrong, but for daring to show kindness to the wrong family. Mrs. Henderson found her sitting on the edge of her bed an hour later, the letter crumpled in her lap. "Oh, child," the older woman said, sitting beside her. "I heard. Half the town's heard by now." "I'm ruined," Clara whispered. "No school will hire me after this, not in this territory, maybe not anywhere." "You could fight it," Mrs. Henderson suggested. "Tell your side." Clara shook her head. "Against Prudence Blackwood and her friends, against their money and influence, I'd lose, and everyone knows it." She stood abruptly, wiping her eyes. "I'll start packing." I can take the stage to Tucson by week's end, maybe find work there. And leave Lily? Mrs. Henderson asked gently. Clara's composure cracked. What choice do I have? At the Iron Tea Ranch, Samuel learned about Clara's dismissal from his foreman, Will Carter, who'd heard it from a ranch hand who'd been in town that morning. Samuel didn't say a word. He simply stood, grabbed his coat and hat, and headed for the door. "Boss, where are you going?" Will called after him. "To fix this," Samuel said, his voice like steel. But when Samuel arrived at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, Clara refused to see him. Mrs. Henderson delivered the message herself. "She says you've done enough. She doesn't want to cause you or Lily any more trouble." Samuel stood on the porch, hat in his hands, frustration and helplessness warring in his chest. "Tell her I'm not leaving until she talks to me." "She said you'd say that," Mrs. Henderson replied. "She also said if you truly care about her and Lily, you'll let her go quietly. Let this blow over." Samuel's jaw clenched. That's not happening. He waited on that porch for 3 hours. As the afternoon sun began to sink, Clara finally emerged, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes red from crying. "You're being stubborn," she said, her voice tired. "So are you," Samuel countered. "I'm being practical," Clara corrected. "You have a daughter to think about, a reputation to maintain, a business that depends on the goodwill of this community." "I have all of that," Samuel agreed, "but none of it means anything if I'm too much of a coward to stand up for what's right." He stepped closer. "You did nothing wrong, Clara. Nothing." "That doesn't matter," Clara said, her voice breaking. "The perception is what matters. And the perception is that I'm an opportunistic woman trying to trap a wealthy widower." "Then we change the perception," Samuel said firmly. "How?" Clara asked desperately. "You can't undo what's been said. You can't force people to believe the truth." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "No. But I can show them." "Show them what?" "That they're wrong about you. About us." He took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Give me until Sunday. Don't leave until Sunday." "Samuel." "Please," he said, and the raw vulnerability in his voice stopped her protest. "Trust me. One more time." Clara looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen before. Not just grief or loneliness, but fierce determination. The same strength that had built an empire from dirt and sweat. "One more time," she whispered. Sunday came cold and bright. The entire town gathered at the church for the weekly service, as was custom. The building was packed. Ranchers in their Sunday suits, wives in their finest dresses, children squirming in the pews. Clara sat in the very back, her head high despite the whispers. She wore her best dress, a simple green cotton that had been her mother's, and kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. Samuel and Lily sat in their usual pew near the front. He'd barely heard a word of Reverend Michael's sermon. His mind was fixed on what came next. When the Reverend finally concluded and opened the floor for community announcements, Samuel stood. The church went silent. He stepped into the aisle, removed his hat, and turned to face the congregation. Lily looked up at him with wide eyes. "I have something to say," Samuel began, his voice carrying through the wooden building, "and I need all of you to hear it." Prudence Blackwood sat 3 rows back, her fan fluttering nervously. Several men shifted uncomfortably. "For the past 18 months, I've been a ghost," Samuel continued. "I buried my wife, and I buried myself along with her. I stopped being a father to my daughter. I stopped being a member of this community. I just stopped." Lily reached up and took his hand. He squeezed it gently. "And then a school teacher showed my daughter kindness when I'd forgotten how," Samuel said, his voice growing stronger. "She stayed late when I was too caught up in work to pick up my own child. She gave Lily attention and care when I was too broken to do it myself. And slowly, because of her example, I learned how to be a father again." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Some of you have been spreading rumors," Samuel said, his gaze sweeping the room. suggesting that Miss Bennet has ulterior motives, that she's using my daughter to get to my money. His voice hardened. You're wrong, and you should be ashamed. Prudence's face flushed crimson. Miss Clara Bennet is the finest woman I've ever known, Samuel declared. She's kind, principled, and selfless. She lost her position because she refused to turn her back on a lonely child, because she had the courage to do what was right, even when it cost her everything. He turned and looked directly at Clara, sitting in the back. Their eyes met across the crowded church. And I'll be damned if I let this community destroy her for it. The silence was absolute. Then Samuel did something no one expected. He walked down the aisle, past every staring face, until he stood before Clara. He extended his hand. Walk out of here with me, he said quietly, with your head high. Show them you have nothing to be ashamed of. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Slowly she placed her hand in his. Together they walked back up the aisle. Lily scrambled from the pew and ran to them, taking Clara's other hand, and as they stepped out into the brilliant November sunshine, the entire congregation watched in stunned silence. Samuel Thornton had made his choice, and he'd made it publicly. The Monday following Samuel's declaration in church, something unexpected happened in Red Creek. People started talking. But this time the conversation had shifted. At the general store, Mrs. Henderson loudly praised Clara's teaching to anyone who would listen. My niece learned to read in 3 months under Miss Bennet's instruction. 3 months. The girl's a natural educator, and this town was lucky to have her. At the saloon, several ranch hands from the Iron T made it known that any man speaking ill of Miss Bennet would answer to them personally. Word spread quickly. Samuel Thornton's loyalty was not something to be taken lightly. Even Reverend Michaels addressed the congregation the following Sunday, speaking on the sin of bearing false witness and the importance of protecting the innocent from gossip's poisoned tongue. His eyes lingered meaningfully on Prudence Blackwood, who sat rigid in her pew, her fan working furiously. Within 2 weeks, the school board received a petition signed by 43 families demanding Clara's reinstatement. Samuel Thornton's name was first on the list, written in bold, decisive strokes. The board had little choice. On a gray December morning, Clara received a formal letter of apology and an invitation to return to her position, with a modest raise in salary, funded by an anonymous donation. Clara knew exactly who that anonymous donor was. Her first day back at the schoolhouse was one she'd never forget. Every single student was present, and several new families had enrolled their children. The room was packed to bursting. When Lily saw her, the little girl let out a shriek of joy and ran into Clara's arms. "You came back. You came back." Clara held her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I told you I would, sweetheart." That afternoon, when Samuel came to collect Lily, he lingered in the doorway. Clara looked up from organizing primers, and their eyes met. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything you did." Samuel stepped inside, turning his hat in his hands. "I only told the truth." "You risked your standing in this community," Clara said. "Your business relationships, all for dash dash." "For you," Samuel interrupted gently. "I did it for you, Clara. Because you matter. Because what we have, whatever this is between us, it matters." Clara's breath caught. The classroom suddenly felt very small, very intimate. "Samuel, I'm not good with words," he continued, stepping closer. "I'm better with cattle and contracts than feelings, but I need you to know that you've changed everything. For Lily, for me." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, carved with delicate wildflowers. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "I made this," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Spent every evening for 2 weeks carving it. Catherine used to tease me about my woodworking, said I was better with livestock than lathes." A sad smile crossed his face. "But I wanted to make something with my own hands. Something worthy of you." He opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a simple gold ring, with a small turquoise stone, the color of Arizona sky. "Clara Bennett," Samuel said, his voice steady now, certain. "I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other a few months, but I also know that life is short and unpredictable, and love, real love, doesn't come around often." He lowered himself to one knee right there in the schoolhouse, surrounded by small desks and children's drawings pinned to the walls. "You brought my daughter back to life. You brought me back to life, and I don't want to spend another day without you in it." His green eyes held hers. "Will you marry me? Will you be Lily's mother and my wife?" Clara couldn't speak. Tears poured down her cheeks as she nodded, once, twice, then finally found her voice. "Yes, yes, Samuel. Yes." He stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then, with trembling hands, he cupped her face and kissed her, tender and reverent, like a promise sealed. Outside, several townspeople happened to be passing by. They saw the embrace through the schoolhouse window and smiled, nodding to each other with approval. That evening, Samuel invited Clara to dinner at the ranch. When she arrived, she found the dining room transformed with candles and wildflowers. Lily wore her finest dress and had helped Mrs. Rodriguez prepare a feast. "Sit here, Miss Clara," Lily insisted, patting the chair beside her own. "You're going to be my mama now, so you have to sit with the family." Clara's heart swelled. She looked at Samuel across the table, and he smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. After dinner, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Samuel took Clara's hand. "I never thought I'd feel this again," he admitted quietly. "After Catherine, I thought that part of my life was over." Clara squeezed his hand. "Love doesn't replace what we've lost. It just gives us the courage to keep living." Samuel pulled her closer. "She would have liked you, Catherine. She always said the best people were the ones who showed up when it mattered." "Then I hope I make her proud," Clara whispered. "You already do," Samuel replied. Inside, through the window, they could see Lily drawing at the kitchen table, her tongue poking out in concentration. She looked up, saw them together, and waved enthusiastically. They waved back. "When should we tell her officially?" Clara asked. Samuel chuckled. "I think she already knows. She's been asking when you'd move in since October." Clara laughed, the sound bright and free. "Well, we wouldn't want to disappoint her." As the stars began to appear overhead, Samuel wrapped his arm around Clara's shoulders. For the first time in nearly 2 years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to celebrate. The announcement of their engagement appeared in the Red Creek Gazette the following week. The town responded with genuine warmth. Gifts arrived at the boarding house, well wishes were offered on the street, and even Prudence Blackwood managed a stiff congratulations at church, though she couldn't quite meet Clara's eyes. Samuel Thornton had made his choice public, and Red Creek had accepted it. Now, all that remained was to make it official. Spring arrived in the Arizona Territory with a riot of wildflowers, desert marigolds, lupines, and Indian paintbrush, carpeting the hills in purple, gold, and crimson. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming sage, and the sky stretched endless and blue above the Iron Tea Ranch. It was the perfect day for a wedding. Clara stood in the ranch house, looking at herself in the mirror. Her dress was simple, cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, nothing extravagant, but beautiful in its simplicity. Mrs. Rodriguez had woven wildflowers into her chestnut hair, and the turquoise ring on her finger caught the morning light. "You look like an angel," Mrs. Henderson said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Lily burst into the room, wearing a pale yellow dress with ribbons in her golden curls. "Miss Clara, everyone's here. Papa's waiting by the big cottonwood tree, and he looks so handsome, and Reverend Michaels is ready, and—" She paused, breathless. "Can I call you Mama now? Or do I have to wait until after?" Clara knelt down, her eyes filling with tears. "You can call me Mama right now if you'd like, sweetheart." Lily threw her arms around Clara's neck. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, my darling girl," Clara whispered, holding her close. The ceremony was held beneath the ancient cottonwood tree that stood at the edge of the ranch property, its branches spreading wide like a blessing over the assembled guests. There were no fancy decorations, just blankets spread on the grass, simple wooden benches borrowed from the church, and wildflowers everywhere. The guests were a mixture of ranch hands, townspeople, students and their families, and even a few neighboring ranchers, including, surprisingly, Chester Blackwood. Though Prudence had mysteriously taken ill that morning, Samuel stood beneath the cottonwood in a new black suit, his hat in his hands, his dark hair combed back. Will Carter stood beside him as best man, grinning broadly. When Clara appeared, walking slowly down the grassy aisle with Mrs. Henderson at her side, Samuel's breath caught. The woman he'd almost lost, the woman who'd saved him and his daughter, was about to become his wife. Lily walked ahead of Clara, carefully scattering flower petals and taking her job very seriously. Clara reached Samuel's side, and he took her hands in his. They were calloused and strong, the hands of a man who'd built an empire through hard work, but they held hers with infinite gentleness. Reverend Michaels cleared his throat and began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God and this community to join Samuel Thornton and Clara Bennett in holy matrimony." But Clara barely heard the words. She was lost in Samuel's eyes, those green eyes that had been so guarded and distant when she'd first met him, now open and filled with love. When it came time for vows, Samuel spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Clara, when I lost Catherine, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. I became a shell of a man, going through the motions but never really living." He paused, his grip on her hands tightening. "You showed me that love doesn't end with loss, that hearts can heal, that it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You gave me back my daughter, and you gave me back myself. I promise to spend every day of my life showing you what that means to me." Clara's tears flowed freely as she spoke her own vows. "Samuel, I came to Red Creek with nothing but a worn satchel and a dream of making a difference. I never imagined I'd find a family, a home, a love that would change everything." She looked down at Lily, who stood between them, then back at Samuel. "I promise to love you both with everything I have, to be a mother to Lily, a partner to you, and to build a life together that honors all we've been through and all we're becoming. Do you, Samuel Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Samuel said firmly. "And do you, Clara Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Clara whispered. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride." Samuel cupped Clara's face in his hands and kissed her tenderly as the assembled guests erupted in cheers and applause. Lily squealed with delight and wrapped her arms around both of their legs. Samuel laughed a deep, genuine sound and scooped his daughter up with one arm while keeping the other around Clara. "We're a family now," he said, his voice thick with joy. "We're a family," Lily echoed, beaming. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared a feast, and tables groaned under the weight of roasted beef, fresh bread, vegetables from the ranch garden, and 3 different kinds of pie. A fiddler played, and people danced on the grass as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Clara danced with Samuel, with Lily, with Will Carter, and several ranch hands who insisted on celebrating their boss's happiness. She'd never felt so welcomed, so loved, so completely at home. As evening approached and guests began to depart, Samuel, Clara, and Lily walked hand in hand toward the ranch house. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the first stars were beginning to appear. Lily skipped between them, swinging their hands. "Will you read to me tonight, Mama? Papa can too. We can all read together." "Of course, sweetheart," Clara said, her heart full to bursting. At the porch steps, Samuel paused and looked back across his land, the rolling hills, the grazing cattle, the vast expanse of territory he'd worked so hard to build. But none of it compared to what he held in his arms now. "Thank you," he said quietly to Clara. "For what?" "For not giving up. On me. On us." He pulled her close. Lily nestled between them. "For teaching me that the bravest thing a man can do isn't building an empire. It's opening his heart again." Clara reached up and kissed him softly. "We saved each other, Samuel. That's what love does." They went inside together, the three of them, into the warm glow of lamplight and the promise of 1,000 tomorrows. And in that moment, under the vast Arizona sky, a teacher, a rancher, and a little girl who'd brought them together became exactly what they were always meant to be: a family, whole, healed, and finally, truly home. Thank you for riding along on this journey through the Arizona territory where love bloomed in the unlikeliest of places and a simple act of kindness changed 3 lives forever. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it with someone who believes that second chances and true love are worth fighting for. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to support our channel and never miss another tale from the frontier. Your support keeps these stories alive and reminds us all that connection, courage, and family are the things that truly matter. Until next time, keep your hearts open, your spirits strong, and never stop believing in the power of love. Stories that heal, stories that last.